The fire crackled in the little wood stove, but I still felt cold that night. Maybe it was not the air, but the words echoing in my head. Words that pierced deeper than any winter chill. It was Christmas Eve, and I had carried my best dish, a roast I had saved money for months to make, to my son's big house. The lights outside his home sparkled, and laughter spilled out the windows. My heart was trembling with both joy and fear. I had been waiting all year to be with him, with his children, with the family I once dreamed of. But then, he looked at me. My only son. My blood. And in front of everyone, with his wife, her parents, his children all sitting at the long decorated table, he laughed and said, "You're the most useless." I sat in my small wooden chair, my little house creaking around me as though it too carried the weight of years. Across from me, my grandson, Jacob, sat cross-legged on the rug. His eyes were wide, his small hands wrapped around a mug of cocoa I had made for him. He didn't interrupt me, not once. He only listened, and in his silence, I felt safe to peel open wounds I had carried for a lifetime. "Jacob," I whispered, "your father may call me useless now. But he doesn't remember how I once worked my hands raw for him. And maybe that's my mistake, loving too much and demanding too little." His eyes flickered with something, sadness, confusion, maybe even anger. "Therefore," I continued, "because if I stopped, I might never start again. When he was a boy, I had nothing. Your grandfather died when your father was only 6. It was winter, and our roof leaked. I remember standing in the rain patching holes with my apron because I couldn't afford tar. I worked 3 jobs, cleaning houses, sewing for neighbors, and scrubbing at a diner until my back ached so much I couldn't stand straight. But I did it. I did it because he was my child, and I believed every sacrifice was worth it." The stove popped, sending sparks of heat into the dim room. My memory, though, painted colder pictures. I walked miles to buy him shoes when his feet outgrew the old ones. I ate stale bread so he could drink milk. Nights, I sat awake by a single candle, sewing little shirts out of old curtains, because I couldn't bear the thought of him being laughed at in school. And do you know what, Jacob? He never noticed. He just wore them proudly, like they were the finest things in the world. A thin smile tugged at my lips, but it didn't last long. But as he grew, something changed. Money became more important than love. I gave him everything I could, my strength, my years, my very soul. Therefore, I never thought he would turn his back on me. But life doesn't always repay kindness with kindness. I reached across the table and took Jacob's small hand. His skin was soft, warm, untouched by the scars that life had carved into mine. "Jacob, people will tell you that family is forever. But sometimes, even family forgets. That's the hardest lesson of all." Tears burned my eyes, and my voice trembled. "Do you know what it feels like to sit at a table where everyone laughs except you? To hear your own son, the child you nearly died bringing into this world, say you're useless. It's like the ground itself disappears." But I didn't crumble. Not in front of them. I smiled, though my heart was breaking. I left quietly, carrying my roast back home like a wounded soldier carrying a flag. Jacob squeezed my hand gently. "Grandma, you're not useless." Those words, spoken by a child, healed me more in that moment than years of silence ever could. "Thank you, my boy," I whispered. "But let me tell you more, because you must understand why strength matters, why dignity matters. After your grandfather died, people told me to remarry. They said a woman alone couldn't survive. But I refused. I said, I have my son. He is enough. And so I worked. I fought. I kept food on the table and hope in his heart. But when he grew into a man, his wife whispered poison into his ear. She told him I was a burden. She told him I was old-fashioned, useless, embarrassing. And he believed her. That is why, Jacob, Christmas hurt so much. It wasn't just his words that night. It was all the years I spent keeping him alive, only to be treated as though my life had no meaning. I leaned back, my shoulders heavy but my voice steady. Therefore, Jacob, I want you to remember something. Never measure a person's worth by what they can give you today. Remember what they've already given. And never, ever let love turn into convenience. Because once you forget sacrifice, you forget your own roots. Jacob's eyes glistened, and I saw the reflection of the fire in them, small flames, just like the ones inside me. The night outside howled with wind, but in that little room, I felt a seed of warmth. Still, beneath the warmth, something sharper stirred. But Jacob, I whispered, lowering my voice, don't think I will stay silent forever. A mother's heart forgives much. But it does not forget. And sometimes, when life shows you how little others value you, you must find a way to remind them who you truly are. The boy tilted his head. What do you mean, Grandma? I smiled faintly, though there was steel behind it. You'll understand soon. For now, just know this, I am not useless. And one day, your father will learn that the hard way. The fire hissed, and the shadows in the room seemed to lean closer, as if even they were waiting for the storm that was coming. The storm outside had calmed by morning, but in my heart, another storm was only beginning. Jacob was still asleep on the couch, curled under the quilt I had stitched years ago from scraps of fabric no one else wanted. His chest rose and fell in peace, unaware of the fire smoldering inside his grandmother. I stood at the window, staring out at the barren yard. The snow covered everything in silence, but my thoughts were loud. For too long, I had carried wounds in silence. For too long, I had let my son's words cut me down, until I began to wonder if he was right. But that night at Christmas, when he called me the most useless woman ever, something inside me cracked open, and what spilled out was not weakness, but power. Therefore, I decided, he needed to learn. Not through anger. Not through shouting. But through truth, sharp and undeniable. By the following week, I had gone to the bank. Many people didn't know this, but over the years, while scrubbing floors and sewing clothes, I had also been quietly saving. Every dime, every dollar. I had lived with little, so that my son could have much. But after he turned away from me, I stopped giving him everything. Instead, I gave to myself, careful, patient, quiet investments. Stocks. Land. Even a little company that grew beyond what anyone expected. And now, at 72 years old, I was not the poor, weak woman he imagined. I was wealthy, wealthier than he could ever guess. Therefore, I wrote a letter and asked Jacob to deliver it to his father. Inside, I invited him and his wife to dinner at my small home. Just one meal, just one evening. He accepted, though I knew it was not from love, it was from curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe even the thought of what I still had left to give. When the night came, my old house glowed with candles. I cooked the roast again, slow and tender, filling the air with the smell of garlic and thyme. The same roast I had carried away from their Christmas table, but this time, it was mine, on my terms. They arrived together, my son and his wife. Their eyes moved around my little house, judging, searching. They sat stiffly at the table, their fine coats draped across the chairs. Mother, my son said, clearing his throat. This is nice. His wife smiled thinly, like a cat watching a mouse. I nodded, ladling soup into their bowls. Eat. You'll need your strength. The silence was thick, but I broke it with words sharper than knives. You called me useless, Michael. At Christmas, in front of your children, in front of everyone. Do you remember? He flinched, his spoon clattering. His wife shifted uncomfortably. Mother, No, I interrupted. Listen. Because this may be the last time I open my heart to you. I leaned forward, my voice steady. You thought I had nothing. But I have everything. I own land, businesses, investments. For years, I have been called poor, but in truth, I am rich. I could leave it all to you. But I will not. Not after the way you treated me. Their faces drained of color. His wife's eyes flickered with panic. Mother, please, I didn't mean. You meant every word, I cut in. And words have power. They reveal what's in the heart. You said I was useless. Therefore, you will see how useful I truly am, not to you, but to others who will respect me. I pulled out the will, already signed. Every dollar, every property, every share, it will go to charity, to children who know hunger, to widows who work their hands raw, to little boys like Jacob who sit and listen when others do not. None of it will go to you. The silence after was louder than thunder. My son's lips trembled. His wife's nails dug into his arm. Mother, please. I shook my head. No. You chose your path. You chose pride over gratitude. You chose cruelty over love. And tonight, you will eat this meal not as my heir, but as a guest who has already lost everything he never valued. Jacob stirred in the other room, rubbing his eyes, then shuffled in, clutching the quilt. He looked at the table, at his father's pale face, at my calm one. Grandma, he whispered, are you okay? I smiled gently and held out my hand to him. Yes, my boy. I'm more than okay. Because tonight, I remembered who I am. And tonight, your father learned what happens when you forget the hands that once fed you. Jacob climbed into my lap, and I kissed his hair. My son sat frozen, his wife staring at the floor. The roast was warm, the house filled with light, and for the first time in years I felt peace. But Jacob, I whispered, as much for him as for the two across the table, never treat love like it is worthless. Because love, when broken, does not die quietly. It rises. It fights back. And it teaches lessons no one forgets. The candles flickered, and in that glow, justice was finally served.